Good evening. Welcome to the Neighborhood Safety Commission's Community Awareness Forum. I'm Carol Massey, and I'm a member of the Safety Commission, and I'm sitting in tonight for Trish Steiner, who is away taking care of home. Our topic tonight is the Cobb County Fire Department and fire safety, and we have a distinguished panel which will be introduced to you shortly. I'd like to welcome those of you in the audience, both present and watching us on Cobb TV. Those present, I'd ask you to please silence your telephones so that it won't interrupt our broadcast. And tonight, our moderator is Joel Cope, attorney, whose practice is in trial litigation. Joel serves this community in a variety of ways. He is a member of the Neighborhood Safety Commission. He's also president of the Mapleton Improvement Coalition. If you have questions, please follow the instructions on the website. And at this point, I will turn it over to Joel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. I appreciate it. Yes, my name is Joel Cope, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's conversation. And as she said, this will be about Cobb County Fire Department and fire safety. We're very fortunate to have some very distinguished panelists with us this evening. And as mentioned by Carol, we do have the ability for people to ask questions. We have a link on our website they can send the information into, as well as we can get written questions from people in the audience. And of course, we also have Cobb TV that we can be watched on by members of the public. And we also have the internet access, so you can stream this as well. So there's multiple ways to participate and be part of this conversation. Obviously, it's a very important topic for us as members of the citizens and of Cobb County. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to basically start with each of our guests and have them give a little bit of information about themselves, and then we're going to go into the Q&A portion of the evening, and then we'll bring that to a conclusion. But I think it's going to be a great topic, and I appreciate each and every one of you volunteering your time to be here tonight. We have with us tonight District Chief Scott White. We have Training Officer Will Collier, EMS Division Chief Spencer Miller, Fire Marshal Jay Westbrook, and District Chief Wayman Jordan. Again, we thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. And I guess I'd like to start with you, Chief, if you would, and let us know about yourself and your experience level with the county department, and then we kind of work our way across, and then we'll begin the Q&A section after that.
Thanks, Joel. My name is Scott White. I'm a district chief with Cobb Fire. I've been with Cobb Fire for about 24 years, and I've been in the fire service for roughly 27 years. My main role in the department is to handle the responses for our department in the western half of the county. I answer to the Deputy Chief of Response, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. And when we get down to Chief Miller, he'll explain the outstanding reason as to why our chief and two deputy chiefs can't be here tonight. So, like I said, I'm in charge of all of our response that covers the western half of Cobb County. That includes Mapleton, Powder Springs, Austell, up through Kennesaw and Ackworth. I've got two special operations teams that fall under my purview. The first being the hazmat team. Our hazmat operations run out of Station 8 in Kennesaw, which is on 41, the super station, and the south side operations run out of Station 22, which is on Austell Road with the police precinct. The second special operations group that I'm in charge of is our airport firefighter response group, and that group is currently also stationed at Station 8, but we're in the process of further developing that team and developing a station at the airport. We'll have a dedicated hazmat and airport response station at the airport, hopefully within the next 2 years or so. One of the last things that I'm involved in fairly heavily is trying to plan for and coordinate our responses to the Northwest Corridor, the dedicated toll lanes out there along 75, which anybody who's traveled down 75 in the last couple of years has obviously noticed what's going on out there. So those are going to present some very unique challenges to our department response-wise. And that's one of the things that I'm working on with Marietta, with Cherokee County, and also with City of Woodstock to coordinate response and figure out how we're going to provide the best life safety protection to the Northwest Corridor.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, Attorney Officer Collier.
Good evening. My name is William Collier. I've been with Cobb County going on 26 years now. I'm a fire captain with Cobb, assigned to the training division. In our training division, we have 15 staff members. We have 1 division chief, 2 training captains, 4 training lieutenants, 3 uh, engineers or drivers. We also have a training EMS coordinator, a EMS instructor, a physical fitness coordinator, and 2 admin specialists assigned to training. Our primary responsibility is fire recruit training, and we do that training in 2 phases. One phase is, of course, fire school, which is about 12 weeks, and the other phase is our EMS program, which is about 26 weeks. Once our recruits graduate from our training program, they are nationally certified NPQ firefighters from the state of Georgia. They hold NPQ Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 certifications, and they also hold EMS Advanced MT license. Um, just to note, we recently graduated on April the 13th, 32 firefighters from our program, and we currently have 52 recruits that started on April the 9th. Um, If you're interested in the fire department, we are taking applications at this time. The deadline for those applications is May 31st. And you can go to cardfire.org to put in the application process.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. All right, ES Division Chief Spencer Miller.
Thanks, Joel. My name's Spencer Miller. I'm the EMS Operations Chief. I've been with the county for 29 years, but I've been an EMT for 34 years. I started with an ambulance service before I came over to the fire department. As Chief White said, I just want to mention why Chief Crowder is not here tonight, and he sends his regrets. Him and both of our deputy chiefs are at the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indianapolis, and this is the biggest firefighter conference in North America. And one of our firefighters, Rusty Brown, is receiving the Ray Downey Courage and Valor Award, which is the highest honor a firefighter can receive in North America. And it was for a rescue that he did of a trapped teenager. He was in a helicopter and had to rescue him in a river rescue. And for that, he is getting a medal for that, and it's being presented, and so the chief's up there with him. Just to touch on the EMS division, last year we ran 62,000 calls. Out of those 62,000, 64% were EMS calls. So it's the bulk of what we do every day. And we offer basic life support and advanced life support. Advanced life support is more you taking EKGs, which we can transmit to the hospital if you're having a heart attack. And we also carry drugs for different things like seizures and pregnancy issues and different things like that. We are proud to say that we had 35 cardiac arrest saves last year. These are people that were clinically dead when we arrived, no pulse, no respirations. And we count a full save as being someone that was in that condition we found them and they left the hospital and they walked out of the hospital. So we had 35 people last year and we're very proud of that. And then last, the special operations team that I manage is our medical operations team. They provide medical support to all of our special ops teams, including the ones in law enforcement. But one of their biggest jobs is they're the tactical medics for the Cobb County SWAT team, for the PD, for the Sheriff's Department, and for the Marietta Cobb Smyrna Drug Task Force.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. Firemarshal Westbrook.
Yes, Joel. My name is Jay Westbrook. I'm the division chief and also fire marshal here at Cobb County. A lot of people don't know what the fire marshal's office does, or they end up using our name in vain when things go wrong at a party or something. But essentially what we do, is we perform 3 mandated services that are mandated by Title 25 of the Official Code of Georgia. We do plan review, we do inspections on existing buildings, and then we issue certificates of occupancy. Those are our 3 main duties. Obviously, if you've been around Cobb County over the past couple of years, you can tell there's a lot of construction going on. We're all part of that through the plan review and permitting and inspection process. I think it was in 2017, we did over 10,000 new construction inspections alone. And a lot of people say, well, how does that equate to something? How can I match that up? Well, I use an example that helps people understand it a little bit, and that's with SunTrust Park. When we finished SunTrust Park, that we had over 1,800 inspections and plan review activities related to the construction of SunTrust Park. So that was obviously a big project, but your typical building, we may make anywhere from 20 to 60 visits to a building to do inspections during construction processes. Part of what we do is also collect some fees for the plan reviews and inspections that we perform. And last year we collected over $750,000 in revenue for the things that we do. So that helps offset the cost of operating our office. My position as fire marshal, I report directly to the fire chief, and we also coordinate with our Fire Safety Education Division, which operates out of the Safety Village, and we also work closely with our Fire Investigations Unit for the investigation and cause determination of fires that occur in Cobb County. So that's kind of what I do and how we're organized.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. And last, by no means least, is District Chief Wayman Jordan.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. I'm Wayman Jordan, District Chief. Scott White and our counterparts. Typically, we have battalion chiefs who respond or report to us on a daily basis. We're responsible for the day-to-day operations of the department where the rubber meets the road. In addition to that, I cover the eastern half of Cobb County. Scott takes care of the western half of Cobb County. In addition to that, I'm also responsible for the technical rescue team. 36 members, 2 different locations, 12 members per shift at 3 shifts. Our team is located at Station 4 on Cumberland Parkway in Vinings, which is down in the Cumberland Galleria area. And the other part of the team is up in Northeast Cobb on Sandy Plains Road at Holly Springs Road at Station 14. In addition to these guys are normal firefighters just like everybody else on the department. But in addition to their firefighter duties and their medical responsibilities, they're also trained in a number of technical rescue disciplines. Some of these are confined space rescue, swift water rescue, trench rescue, high angle rope, vehicle extrication, and structural collapse. And Chief Miller mentioned our firefighter Rusty Brown, who received award. This team also makes up part of a helicopter rescue team in conjunction with Georgia State Patrol and Cobb PD. They go on a number of these type rescues each year. This particular one that Chief Miller mentioned was at High Falls State Park, which is probably 80 miles south of here. So they go all over North Georgia for various types of rescue. They report down to some of the hurricane damage down in South Georgia, Irma, Matthew, those sorts of things. They're also a part of the Georgia Search and Rescue Program, GSAR is what we call it for short, which started in 2003. This program allows us to, we're part of a task force in Metro Atlanta, which allows us to use the resources from throughout Metro Atlanta in the event of a large-scale incident in Cobb County. So it allows us to kind of share resources among the departments in Metro Atlanta. Going back to the rescue that Rusty Brown made down at High Falls State Park, this is a very high award. Most people consider it the highest award in the fire service in the United States. So Rusty was a part of our technical rescue team and part of this helicopter team that made this rescue. Okay. So we're proud of that.
All right, well, great. Well, since both of you touched on this, If you could just share with people, what are the criteria to receive that award, and how many people are up for nomination in any given year on average for that distinction?
I think the final list probably somewhere around a dozen. There's a panel that makes these decisions based on the criteria that's submitted to them. There's people submitted for this all over the United States. So we're very honored to have one of our own. It's the first time anybody from Cobb County's ever won it. There's only one given each year.
So it's a very distinguished honor to be picked out of the entire United States for this.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Well, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let me kind of go over a few basics, I guess, for our audience members who may not be aware. One of the things that people often wonder is they hear that term first responder used. And when that term is being used, who is that referring to? Is that the fire department? Is that the police department? Who is included in that term as you guys define it, as you experience that in your daily lives?
Well, basically, it's everybody that's going to come out to the scene to handle the scene. It could be the fire department, the police department, EMS, everybody that's needed to go out there to address any kind of issue that may come up out there, whether it's an active shooter and law enforcement's needed, and fire department EMS is needed to treat the victims. It could also be the sheriff's department or any other agency that offers assistance to us on a large-scale incident. And I just want to point out too that all first responders aren't government employees. In Cobb County, we contract our ambulance services. The fire department does not transport you to the hospital. We contract with 2 private ambulance services, and they function as the EMS in the county. They work with our 911. They're on the same frequency as the fire department, and they're one branch of the first responders here in the county.
Okay. Well, that's a great point you bring up. So if somebody is determined medically to need to be transported from their home or apartment or wherever to a hospital or nearby medical facility, you're not going to see them being loaded up in a Cobb County Fire Department vehicle to be transported, correct?
That's correct. They're under a 5-year contract with us, and they receive a subsidy from the county, and at the same time they do charge for their services if you utilize them. But they have 2 zones. One is Puckett EMS, and they're in the south and the southwest part of the county. And then the rest of the county is covered by Metro Atlanta Ambulance Service.
Okay. All right. Now, I know another thing that people hear about is ISO and the ISO ratings. Why would a member of the community care what the ISO rating is, other than they might think it's just a bragging point for the county, as a county?
Well, it is something to brag about how good your department is rated. Basically, there's a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the highest. And depending on how your department is ranked is how high your fire insurance fees are going to be. Cobb County is an ISO Class 1. Now, to give you some perspective on that, there's 831 fire departments in the state of Georgia, and 21 of them are Class 1s. Now, nationwide, only 1/3 of 1% of the fire departments in the country are Class 1. And if you look at county fire departments, that number goes down even smaller. It's mostly city departments. But basically, we're rated on our 911 system, our water system, and then the fire department. And all these are combined to give you a score. And when we went to a Class 1, we went from a Class 3 to a Class 1. So, and we got almost 100% of our score that you could earn for our 911 center and our water system. So that shows you that in Cobb County, you're getting the most out of all the departments in the county. And because of that, everyone should see a decrease in their fire insurance rates.
And how many fire stations are there in Cobb County? From north to south, east to west?
29 stations, and we've got the county broken up into 5 we call them battalions, which are just smaller areas within the county. We have 29 stations within the county.
Okay.
And to piggyback on what Chief Miller said about insurance, because we've gone to a Class 1, I would encourage Cobb County residents to reshop their insurance since we've done that.
Okay.
There's a very good possibility that their insurance rates could decrease.
Is a part of that ISO rating a fact that a resident has to be within a certain mile radius or a certain time radius of the nearest fire station?
It depends on the insurance underwriter. Some insurance underwriters look at distance from a fire station. Some look at distance from the nearest fire hydrant. Some look at distance from the nearest station and the distance to the nearest fire hydrant. We commonly in the fire marshal's office get questions from people in the public that want to know, where's the closest fire hydrant to my house? Where's the closest fire station? Usually they're asked that by their insurance provider or their agent. But it depends on the insurance underwriter as to the parameters that they look at, and the ISO rating and hydrant spacing and location of the nearest fire station are all factors that they factor into how they issue the rates.
Okay. And how many currently trained firefighters do we have on staff in Cobb County at this very moment in time?
Right now, we're right at 700 personnel. And like Chief Jordan said, that's spread over 5 battalions, over 3 shifts, plus support personnel. And we do have several civilian employees that perform different functions.
Okay. And if you can kind of explain to me, I think most people understand firefighters, the ones that wear the special gear and they have the hats and the helmets and so forth. But that's obviously not the entire fire department. I mean, you obviously have a ranking. What if you start with that level of firefighter and work your way up, what is the chain of command in the fire department?
For us, we begin with the firefighter. We have, our staffing model is pretty much a pyramid. The firefighters are the base of our organization. They're the ones that do the most important work. They're the ones that save the lives, the ones that go in and attack the fires, the ones that perform the CPR. They're the ones that really do the hardest part of this job. Once you've been a firefighter for 3 years, you're eligible to test for the next level, which is engineer or driver. That person, their job is to their primary purpose is to drive the fire apparatus. And when the station officer is off, they would step up into the role of station officer for the day. Once you get above engineer, the next level is lieutenant. A lieutenant in our organization is typically the station officer, the one in charge of that station for that given day. Next above lieutenant is captain. Each of our battalions and shifts has 2 captains. Those captains, their primary duty is to provide training for the entire battalion, make sure that any of the training needs that are out there that they've identified are fulfilled. And so we keep our folks trained at the highest levels. And they would also fill in for battalion chief when the battalion chief is off. Above captain is in fact battalion chief. Battalion chief runs the day-to-day operations in their battalion. We've got, as Chief Jordan mentioned, we've got 5 battalions, 3 shifts. So we have 15 battalion chiefs out there working throughout the days. Above battalion chief, from the response side, you get into district chiefs, Chief Jordan and myself. And then above that is you move to deputy chief. We have a deputy chief over response who we answer to. Our other deputy chief at the time is our chief over preparedness, Chief Bill Johnson. And his main purpose is to manage everything with regard to, basically doesn't fall within the response realm. Training, facilities, maintenance, fire marshal. That's a pretty lengthy list. And then above the deputy chiefs is actually Chief Randy Kreider.
Okay, well, great, thank you. Now, I know you mentioned there's an east and west part of the county for the purposes of your jobs. Is there a north and south as well, or is it strictly just east-west?
For the district chiefs, we made the distinction just to basically east and west because Chief Jordan came up in more of a technical rescue mode of response and training, was heavily involved in the technical rescue side. And because those stations are essentially on the eastern half of the county, we decided to make Chief Jordan in charge of that. I came more from a hazmat perspective and worked closely with the airport folks. And so it was a natural fit for us to split the county east-west with regard to the specialty teams. So that's basically how we split it from a response perspective.
And is Interstate 75 the dividing line between the two halves?
Yeah, it's pretty close. 2nd Battalion down in the southeast side of the county, 75 pretty much splits it right down the middle. The 3rd Battalion is northeast Cobb. 4th Battalion is northwest Cobb. 5th Battalion is essentially West Cobb, and then 1st Battalion is South Cobb, Mableton, Powder Springs, that general area.
And as far as the battalions, how are the geographic areas determined? Is it based on the population in that battalion? Is it based on a specific geographic boundary like a river or some specific landmark?
Up till about of March of this year, we only had 4 battalions. And what we found was that created some management issues for our battalion chiefs, some span of control issues. We had some battalion chiefs that were involved that were in charge of 7 stations, and other battalion chiefs that were in charge of 8 stations. And when you get up towards 8 stations, it becomes a little cumbersome. Typical span of control is 3 to 7, with 5 being optimal. Those are studies that have been done in all sorts of fields aside from fire. And so we felt like getting up to 8 stations was outside a reasonable span of control. And finally, after years of trying, back in March, we implemented a 5th Battalion to help maintain or manage some of that span of control a little bit better. So basically the way we split up the battalions is drawing lines for effective span of control when it comes to response issues.
Okay. Now, one thing I was going to ask you, you mentioned that the engineers, I guess, are one notch in the rank above a regular firefighter. And maybe that's not the right title, but that's what I'm calling it. Now, I noticed they wear headsets and have like a microphone. What's the reason behind that? Are they receiving instructions, or is this to block out the sound of the siren? I mean,
Some of both. It helps with blocking out the sound of the sirens, and it also helps better communications inside the cab. Typically, we have a driver and an officer or a lieutenant up front in the cab, and a firefighter or 2 in the back. And it improves communications from front to back. You wouldn't think it'd be difficult, but with sirens going and an engine revving, sometimes it's difficult to communicate in the cab of an engine.
and so is that really who they're communicating with? Is just each other, or is there
Yes.
anybody else?
Just those in the vehicle with them.
Okay, so they're not radioing back to the headquarters or something like that, or the fire station. Not on that particular device anyway. They're just
Correct.
talking internal
Correct.
to the truck.
One of the things that also helps protect with is hearing loss. Listening to the sirens blare.
Sure.
The folks that hear us coming a quarter mile away or 100 feet, 200 feet away are hearing that siren. We're sitting there within about 6 to 10 feet of that siren. So hearing loss historically in the fire service has been a major issue. Those of us sitting up here in the panel didn't have the luxury of those things when we were riding in the engines. And so, I know me personally, a little bit of hearing loss in those very high end, the high pitched sounds, and that's a very common phenomenon within firefighters. So hopefully that's a step in the right direction to try to curtail some of the hearing loss that occurs on a pretty regular basis.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little about the training. What kind of training goes into being a firefighter? How long is the training? And what kind of things do they have to do in order to clear and be approved to go on to the next step of being a firefighter?
Here in Cobb, our training is broken up into about 2 phases. We have about 12 weeks of fire school and then about 20 weeks of EMS school. During the fire phase, they're taught how to raise ladders, how to lower ladders. They're taught about forcible entry, search and rescue, vertical ventilation, positive pressure ventilation. So there's a series of skill sets that these firefighters are taught. On the EMS side of the fire school, they go through basic, what we call basic EMS skills for about 10 weeks, and then for about 16 weeks, they go into a little bit more advanced EMS skills.
And are these trainings mandated by the state, or is this Cobb specific? Like, I'm not going to get this kind of training in Douglas or Fulton or Paulding?
This training is mandated by the state. All of our firefighters are Georgia State certified. All our firefighters are EMS certified through Region 3 in the state of Georgia. Is that correct? So, no, this is not Cobb County specific training. This is state training, and some instances for our national professional qualification is national training.
And how are people evaluated as they go through the training? Is it just strictly pass fail, or do you get like letter grades, number grades on different sections? I mean, hey, you get a 95 for scaling a ladder, and you get a 65 for EMS training or something. I mean, is that how does that work exactly?
For our program, they are trained, they are evaluated both on their academics and their performance doing their skills. On the firefighter, while they're in fire recruit school, usually every Monday or every other Monday, they're taking a test, and they have to pass that test with a 75% passing rate. The same on the EMS side, and then they are all judged on their performance.
Okay. And is that training received here in Cobb County, or do they have to go to a training center like the one in Forsyth to receive that?
No, we do the training in-house here at Cobb County.
Okay.
Our training facility is located at 2109 Viola Drive in Marietta.
And what about the regular ongoing training that kind of helps keep you sharp, so to speak? Is there such a program each year, every other year? And if so, what does it consist of?
Well, like one of the chiefs mentioned, part of the responsibility of a fire captain in the field is to make sure that their personnel gets ongoing training. In the case of the training division, we're basically there for initial training and then recertification training. Now, we are responsible for 2 major departmental drills during the year. One of those drills are in the spring and one is in the fall. Depending on what kind of challenges or issues we may be facing as a department, will determine the type of drills that we do for the entire department for the spring and fall.
And what kind of criteria do you look for in the candidates who come before you to be trained as firefighters? What sort of things are you looking for in terms of either age, skill sets, any criteria that you're looking at?
There's really is no age limit. For the most part,
So I can apply tomorrow?
yes, you can. For the most part, what we ask people to be able to do is that they have to have some type of physical fitness standard. As you know, firefighting is a very laborious job, so you have to have some type of physical fitness strength. Along with that, there's an academic side of it. We no longer just put guys in what we call bunker gear and send them into a house that's on fire. We understand there are some fire dynamics that we need to know. So there's a scientific or academic part that goes along with firefighting.
Okay. And with respect to the trends, are you seeing certain trends in the folks that are going through the fire department now as compared to maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Is there a change, or is it the same?
I believe it's about the same. The trend right now, if we want to say there is a trend, is that firefighters are getting younger. Our department is getting younger and younger.
Okay. And are there any special challenges that you face in recruiting candidates to be firefighters? I understand, at PD, there's different concerns. Are there concerns like that in the fire department, trying to attract people to come in and apply to begin with?
Yes, we do face challenges, and part of that, I believe, is just with the generation. 20 years ago, when we put out applications for the fire process, we were getting 8, 9, 1,000 applications or more. Now, during the application process, we may get 300, 400 applicants to put in. So I just think the mindset with this generation is changing when it comes to firefighting.
And how do you go about trying to attract candidates? I mean, are you going to trade schools, campuses, college campuses? Are you going to downtown to the Georgia World Congress Center? I mean, where are you going to get? Are you going online only? I mean, how do you go about attracting these folks?
Yeah, we actually have some people from our internal affairs that go out to recruit fairs and job fairs. A lot with the military for veterans that are getting out of the military and looking for a career change. There are medics and firefighters in the military, in every branch of the military. So if it's somebody that wants to carry that over into civilian life, a lot of their credentials carry over. But usually they start out just like any other recruit, and because some of their federal certifications won't carry over, and they end up having to take a Georgia course. But for the most part, we try to get the word out there that we're hiring. We extend our period to put in applications to give people time that may be sitting on the fence. They don't know if they want to do it or not. But we've had pretty good luck with the job fairs on attracting people from different states.
Okay. So the training piece does not require you to also go out and recruit them. You just train them once they've come here to you. Is that fair?
Yes. The training is separate than the recruiting. We actually have a recruitment team, and we try to go out and attract individuals that are interested in the fire service.
Okay, all right. And what are there things that Cobb does that its neighbors don't do in training its firefighters? And if so, what are those things? Are there extra steps, extra trainings, extra programs, requirements?
Cobb has a fairly robust training academy, as do many of the departments around us. We've got a lot of other good departments around us. I think one of the things for me personally that sets Cobb apart is the level of training that folks will get when they're at the fire station itself. We have a very large amount of folks that are based at the station, but on their off days, or whether it's in an overtime fashion or voluntary fashion, they'll go down to help the training division and help them give better, more in-depth information to the recruits. When those station officers have that information, they also impart it on their crews, on their battalion. And so we have, we've probably got several dozen folks that are involved in going out and instructing on fire science nationwide. We've got a handful of folks up at FDIC in Indianapolis this week that are involved in putting on training. The benefit of those folks being the experts, is they're in-house, and so we can tap all their expertise very readily. And what that's led to is about 10 years ago, we had a group of those very firefighters that were very strong into the instructing process. They realized that it's very expensive for your typical firefighter to travel to Indianapolis or San Diego or some of these conferences. And so some of these folks got together in our department and created a conference of our own here in Atlanta, the Metro Atlanta Firefighters Conference. I think it's on its ninth or 10th year this year. And so what they've been able to do is create a conference where, for little or no cost, with the exception of travel, and folks can come here and get some of the best training in the country for very little cost, where to go to some of these conferences in Indianapolis or San Diego, somebody could quite conceivably spend probably $2,500. So we have just an outstanding continuing education and continued training in our department. I think that's probably one of the things that makes us a very strong department.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to mention too, just like Scott was talking about, we did the Metro Atlanta Firefighters Conference. We also had a group of our firefighters started the Metro Atlanta EMS Conference, which is in its third year. And it is yet another opportunity for about $35 to get 2 days of training. And it's really good. Some of it's really good hands-on training. We bring a lot of doctors and nationwide speakers in to talk, and the conference has really grown in size over the last 3 years. And this was the same concept. They said it is so hard to get out. We just want something in our own backyard that provides good training that doesn't cost my department much. And for the most part, our guys, if they're really good instructors, they don't want to keep it to themselves. They want to share it. And so because of that, we have some of our people speak at the EMS conference, but at the same time, we bring in instructors from all over the country there.
Okay. Now, I know earlier we talked about the fact that some of the firefighters in Cobb are actually doing work outside of the Cobb county borders, which I guess might be surprising to some. Under what circumstances does that happen, and how many people in the department, as a percentage, does that occur? Is it like the top 1% doing this, or is this like half the department doing this? I mean, and under what circumstances?
Typically, it's our technical rescue team, and I would say it's a dozen times a year probably we're requested to go outside of Cobb County for various reasons. Like I mentioned earlier, we've gone on some deployments to hurricane-related issues in South Georgia. We've gone to North Georgia for rescues in remote areas. The rescue that firefighter Rusty Brown made was one of those circumstances. It's typically in an area where those departments may not have the resources, so they call in people with the resources and the training to take care of those events.
Okay. And internal to Cobb, obviously we have several municipalities. How does that relationship work? I mean, in terms of needs. So if you had a fire event and it required some assistance from a local municipality, is that possible? And if so, under what circumstances would that operate?
Yeah, we have mutual aid agreements with every contiguous county around us and city, and we work well with everybody. So if we had, such as, let's say, City of Marietta had a large fire and most of their department was tied up on it, we'll send our trucks into the city to stand in the stations. And we may stand in the city of Atlanta or in Sandy Springs or Cherokee County. It just depends. And we have written mutual aid agreements with all these municipalities, and there's no type of charge or anything like that. We just back each other up when we need it.
So the Cobb firefighters, if they're responding to another city's emergency, they're actually in the fire station. They're not actually out there at the building, at the house, at the wherever, putting the fire out per se.
No, they could be.
Okay.
But they may say we have a large apartment fire, and they'll put out a request saying we need 3 engines and a ladder truck to backfill our stations. And when they do that, we may send one, and 2 or 3 other municipalities send vehicles too, but we're all here to support each other.
Okay.
Joel, Cobb Fire and Marietta Fire both operate on the same radio frequencies with the same dispatchers. So it makes it very simple.
Okay.
With Marietta in particular, but we also have the capability to communicate with all the departments around us via our radios.
Okay. Now, what happens if you're on an interstate in Cobb County and you come upon a situation where either there's a car fire or maybe a fire that's caught some of the grass on fire and you see it kind of spreading out and everyone's stopping and rubbernecking? I mean, who's tasked with responding to those, and what vehicles do you send out to take care of those situations?
Obviously it's going to be, jurisdictionally driven, where are the closest fire stations. And that's up to our, the folks that are dispatched at our 911 center. They receive the calls. Some of the folks can be geolocated with their phones, their phone location, things of that nature. But, as things have changed over the last, 15, 20 years with, everybody's carrying a cell phone now, usually there's multiple calls to dispatch before we've even made it out of the bay of the station. So we tend to get what I believe to be a more accurate, identification as to where exactly the incident is. And so once dispatch has determined who the appropriate units to go out there, what stations they come from, as of today, we would typically dispatch to an accident or a fire like small fire that you suggested. We dispatch 2 engines out to that location. Each engine would have 3 to 4 people on it. Typically, depending on the severity of the incident, it may be something relatively minor where one crew can handle it, but typically we'll have that second crew stay out there with them to provide some protection in case for all the traffic. one of the most hazardous things we do is respond to the interstate calls. And not because those particular types of calls are any more dangerous than some of the others. It's the hazard of all the cars driving by that really creates the danger. And I think anybody who's out here worked the interstates at all has probably had a close encounter with a vehicle at some point. And that's it's a little unnerving, but we train for it, and we try to protect our folks as best we can with putting the vehicles between, our trucks between the vehicles and us, safety vests, constant awareness, those types of things.
Okay. All right. And when people have fire emergencies, are they supposed to be calling 911, or is there a different designated number for fire emergencies as opposed to like a police department emergency?
No, it's pretty much you call 911 and the call taker will route it to the appropriate dispatcher, depending on because that's when they'll say 911, what's your emergency? And they'll direct you toward a fire operator or to a police operator. And there's also a non-emergency line that you can call if you're just trying to get some advice on something, or you need, you might need a police officer out there, but it's not an emergency. There is a non-emergency line. And, but for the most part, everybody just calls 911. It's one catch-all for everything.
I know in the police department, they talk about, even if you don't think it's an emergency, just call 911 anyway. Let us be the judge of whether it's an emergency or not. Is the fire department's motto the same, or do you say, let's be a little more discerning before you call us?
Yeah, I would say that. I would say that give us a call if you don't know if it's a true emergency or not. Give us a call. Our dispatchers can filter out a lot of those types of calls, and if they can't filter it out, they'll send us out there, and we'll provide whatever service is necessary to assist someone. There's a lot of things we understand that may seem trivial to one person, but it's certainly a true emergency to others. And so, one of the things that we try to urge folks is every now and then we'll have folks drive to the fire station. Oh, my wife wasn't feeling very well, but we didn't want to bother the fire department, so we drove to the fire station. And that's okay. If we'll treat anybody who walks in the door. But if that fire crew is out of the station, now they've wasted valuable time. So we really urge people to call 911 from whatever location they're in, and not necessarily go in trying to find the nearest, first responders to help them out. That'll be the fastest way to get somebody to help them, is call 911 first. It's not a hassle. It's not an inconvenience for us. That's why we're here. That's why folks pay taxes. And so we're happy to come out when somebody feels they're in a moment of need.
Okay. And when the dispatcher's on the phone with somebody who's dealing with a person with an emergency, whether it's a heart attack or stroke or whatever, a fall off some high place, do they actually talk them through emergency techniques like CPR, or do they simply just get information from them and then send the people out there to them to actually provide the actual treatment?
No, they can walk them step by step through things. We have what's called emergency medical dispatch, which is basically the dispatchers have cards on particular things. If somebody says I'm having chest pains, then they go straight to the chest pains protocol, and they start working their way through it. And sometimes they can distinguish between that if the person is having a cardiac issue or some other type of issue. And then the dispatcher, based on where they're told to go in the EMD, basically direct either a basic life support, just a fire truck with EMTs on it who they have a certain amount of drugs, they have IV fluids, they have an AED to defibrillate somebody, or if they need an advanced life support unit, which is more your paramedics coming out that can do EKGs, that have more medications that they can give the person more advanced airways. And usually by following the protocol up there, they can make the determination on who needs to be dispatched. And then at the same time, it's also the officer's discretion that if they're going there and they just keep get updated with more and more information, they may say, go ahead and send a rescue with me.
Okay. I know there was a mention earlier, I think, Mr. Westbrook, you offered about the comment on the public safety village that's down there near County Services Road. Can you talk a little bit more about what's offered to the students who go through that particular training?
Well, most of the training is probably what you would call an all hazards training, or it's focused on community risk reduction. Obviously, it started years ago with fire safety education, helping children to know how to react in their home in a fire, or if their clothes caught on fire, what to do. It's evolved to cover issues like poisoning, not to drink cleaning fluids and things like that, how to actually escape your home during a fire. And there's also a portion of that the police department is involved in educating children about things like stranger danger and crime-sensitive issues related to safety in children. Also and that's kind of both of those are more of a classroom portion. However, they have out in the village, they have a school bus stop where they can make sure that we have children up to speed on how to navigate a school bus stop and staying outside the cross arm. They have training where they have a scenario about pool safety. They have small cars that they drive around the village and begin to learn the rules of the road. They have there are several other props out there that teach them various safety lessons, so that this is not just about fire safety education, but it's more about safety education in general and different things that we know through research are hazards to children. And also we have some classes and stuff for older people as well.
Well, that was my next question I was going to ask you, because it's great that you're training kids, but what about the middle-aged people who are too old to be kids? Is there a program to teach them about fire safety or just general safety tips and how to avoid becoming a future recipient of aid from the fire department?
Yes, there are some classes where we focus on senior citizens and some of the issues that they face within their homes that, once again, are not necessarily only fire-related, but they are safety-related, like tripping and falling in the house and how to prevent that, managing medicines and things like that, so that some of the things that we see happen that cause people to call 911, we try to prevent that through the lessons that we teach through the safety village.
Okay. And isn't there also like a wellness check program that is offered through the county sometimes, especially with senior citizens in mind?
I don't know that that's done through the safety village, but I do know there are some programs like that through the senior centers that are spaced around the county.
Okay. Now I know, Chief Westbrook, you talked about the fact that there are several areas you handle, and I kind of joked with you before we started that you're probably the most powerful person in the county because everyone invokes your name when it comes to like a large meeting space. When they say, "Hey, this is getting too crowded. There's too many people in here. We got to clear this place out." Does that really actually happen in your experience, or is this something like you read about in classroom instructions 20 years ago? Or is it a frequent thing to happen now?
No, it does really happen. There are situations of overcrowding that we need to address. Usually we're able to address it without, as people like to say, shutting places down. We're usually able to manage the overcrowding by letting some people leave, getting it down to a safe number, which is below the occupant load calculation, and then having the managers at the facility do a one in, one out rule from then on, where we work with a lot of different nightclub venues to be able to do that. But we have had, over the years, there have been some places where we had to actually work through with other county departments and actually close a place down for operating illegally without a certificate of occupancy, with or without a business license and alcohol license and things like that.
And with a certificate of occupancy, is that something that you have to get if you're going to build a subdivision for people, or is that the kind of thing you do only if you're having like a warehouse or a business?
Every structure, when it is constructed, either receives a letter of completion or a certificate of occupancy. Now, the way the laws are written in the state of Georgia, the fire marshal's office is not involved in the certificates of occupancy for single-family dwellings. Only the building department works on those. But for anything that is not a single-family dwelling, the fire marshal's office works hand in hand with the building department to issue what we call a joint building and fire certificate of occupancy.
And how many people do you have that can actually go out and make these assessments on these commercial properties?
We have 4 plan review personnel that review plans for either new buildings being constructed or plans for new tenants going into existing buildings. And then we have 7 new construction inspectors that do the inspections for the certificates of occupancy.
So you have 7 inspectors in Cobb County as a whole?
We do.
They must be very busy.
They are. Yes, indeed.
You mentioned that they also do inspections of existing structures. Is that done on a fixed schedule, or is there something that's triggering that event? Something that's a code's changed, now I've got to go back out there and recertify that business?
Yeah, most of our existing building inspections are organized around the target hazards that are identified in state law. For instance, it's all schools, daycares, high-rise buildings, hotels and motels, big box stores like your grocery stores, your Home Depots, your Publix, things like that, and personal care homes, assisted living. There's a list of buildings in Title 25 that says these are the target hazards, and those are the ones that we have on our schedule to inspect on an annual basis.
And are these all determined by state law, or is there anything specific to Cobb in terms of the frequency of visits and things like that?
Most of what we do for existing building inspections follows state law. We do have a few peculiar things with some what we call lodging facilities that we do inspections of because we feel like there is a need there because people are sleeping there and that's a high hazard occupancy that the state may not identify, but we feel like it is for us.
Is there any interplay between what you're doing and code enforcement, for example?
Absolutely.
And how do those intersect each other?
We work very closely with code enforcement. In fact, just this past week, we had information from code enforcement about an illegal lodging facility. What that means is someone is taking, for us, most of the time that means someone is taking a house and is renting rooms, multiple rooms out to individuals, actually more or less operating a motel or hotel out of their house. And that is not only a violation of the fire code, but it's also a violation of our zoning ordinances. So we work hand in hand with code enforcement on situations like that. Sometimes we find out about them from our response crews. Sometimes code enforcement finds out about them from some of their contacts, but we always contact each other and work together to solve that because we both have an interest in it. Now, sometimes they say, hey, this is going on, but we got it handled. So we'll let them handle it. And sometimes we find we've got it handled and everything's good. Sometimes people most of the time they close them down because they don't realize what they're doing that is in violation of the codes. When we explain that and we explain what needs to happen to get it into compliance, then they say, well, we'll just go back to making this a single-family dwelling.
Well, with a single-family dwellings, has the county fire department ever offered to people and say, hey, if you want, we'll come in and check out your smoke detectors and we'll check your fire extinguishers, do they still work properly, or you have enough in your house given its size and number of floors? Do you do that kind of thing?
Yes. Through our safety village, our fire safety education division, they offer what we call home safety checks for single-family dwellings. And they've got a list of things that they check to see what's safe, what needs improvement, and offer you a list of recommendations that you can do to improve the safety around your home. Absolutely. It's not an inspection. It's a safety check just to identify any problems that you might have that you might want to address and educate as we go through that process.
Okay. I know one thing that there's been a lot of discussion about is, of course, the burn ban. I know that's been discussed quite a lot in the public domain, and I think that people who follow this debate might have seen it kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. How did that end up being decided, and what things can people who have certain medical conditions do to protect themselves if they live next door to someone who is a regular burner, for lack of a better phrase? I guess how did that end up happening?
Well, for us in Cobb County, First of all, I want to direct everybody, if you've got questions about outdoor burning, we've got an excellent webpage at cobbfmo.org. It takes you right to the fire marshal's page. The burning page is right, outdoor burning page is right there. We've got some great information there that spells things out. But the burn ban that is about to take effect on May 1st and last until September 30th is a statewide EPD burn ban. And that's been going into effect for about 25 years now. Now, some people think it's just what we do in Cobb County, but it's not. That's statewide. That part of the ban comes from the EPD. What we've done in Cobb County is we've adopted those same rules into local ordinance, and we enforce those from a local stamp. That allows us to enforce those in Cobb Magistrate Court versus the EPD getting involved and going to state court. So that's what we've done locally to enforce that. And that's been in effect for, like I said, almost 25 years now. We've added some things for when burning is occurring to try to make things safer, because we do live in most of Cobb County is a very high dense developed area, and we don't want fires getting out of control, and we don't want them burning things that we don't intend to burn. And being that we are a high density, we do have, when people burn leaves or pine straw or things like that, it creates a lot of smoke, and that bothers other people around them. So we've tried to institute an ordinance that if people will follow it, it'll minimize how much it bothers their neighbors. Something that we also have that you mentioned in the ordinance is the medical burn ban. If you have a medical condition that is bothered by smoke by pine straw or leaves or other yard debris, we can establish a medical burn ban around your area, around your home, and it prevents anyone from near your home burning yard debris that would bother you. We've got about 42 of those areas in Cobb County right now.
And how would the neighbors become aware that they found themselves in a medical burn ban zone?
Our common practice is that usually the person who is requesting the burn ban is aware of who the frequent burners are around their house. That's your word, not mine, the burners.
Right. Yeah. I know it's not a very technical term. It's the best I could
Yes.
come up with.
But it works. Everyone knows what it means, right? When we say that, they know what we mean. So the people that request the ban usually know who does the burning the most. And we allow them to submit to us up to 12 addresses, and we'll send letters to those occupants and notify them. We can't send it to everyone in the area. It's just, we would be searching for addresses for days, and like I said, we've got 40 of these, but we'll send them to 12 people of addresses that they provide. And then if our crews respond to a fire later on that's in the medical burn ban, the people will get a warning that they're in a medical burn ban, and there'll be no citation for the first time.
And what do you tell people to do if they live in an area and they think that somebody's burning in violation of a burn ban? Is there a special number? Is there a special hotline or a certain web address they can go to make that report?
If the direction that we give people in Cobb County, that if they suspect either that a fire is out of control or that burning is going on in violation of the local ordinance, call 911 when the burning is occurring. Now, most people don't want to do that, but that is the best mechanism that we have to address the problem, because people can pile up a load of brush as big as a Volkswagen or a transfer truck, and it is not a violation of anything. We've had people send us pictures before of piles of brush saying they're about to burn, come out and stop them. We're not going to do that. It's not a problem until they light it on fire, and then only then if it exceeds the limits in the ordinance. So what we encourage people to do is call 911 when the burning is occurring. Our crews will respond. They'll write out the appropriate notices, and if needed, later our fire investigators will follow up with a citation if it's warranted by the situation.
Now, I think some of you touched upon this a little earlier, but I think people traditionally in their mind think the fire department equals firefighting. That's it. That's all you do. You just put out fires, and that's it. That's the beginning, middle, and end of your job duties. But I think I've heard a little more variety in what you're doing. How does your job duty break up as opposed to EMS versus, I guess, quote unquote, firefighting that people commonly may think of?
Well, like I touched on earlier, about 64% of the time that we go out, it's an EMS-related issue. But the fire service in general is morphed into an all hazards service, really, because we're going out and it may be an EMS call, and there can be a multiple of things that are an EMS call, medical, trauma, on down the line. You could be going out because, like Chief Westbrook was talking about, you're going out because someone's illegally burning, so you have to be up to date on the burn ordinance. Or we've had to develop a lot of specialty teams, such as the hazardous materials team, the technical rescue team, our medical operations team. I mean, they're going in with the SWAT team, which is something your average firefighter doesn't anticipate doing. They signed on to be a firefighter, but now you're wearing body armor and you're going up to the strong point with the SWAT team. So because of that, it's required tons of extra training for everybody. And most of the time when people come in, you can expect to do some kind of training that day just to be able to try to be up to speed on what could possibly happen, because there's just such a wide array of what people call 911 for. You pretty much have to be ready for anything.
What's the distinction in training or scope between life support and advanced life support training?
Well, like we talked on earlier, there's three types of EMTs in the state of Georgia. There's a basic EMT, an advanced EMT, and a paramedic. And basically, we have everybody has to be an EMT to start with. And then people can choose to be a paramedic. We also offer a lateral program where people can come from other departments and come to work for us and go to an abbreviated paramedic school, or excuse me, a lateral entry school, and they only go for 6 weeks, and then we can get them out in the field. But as far as actual firefighting versus EMS, house fires are very rare and far between, and everybody is appreciative of that. Nobody wants to see anybody have that happen to them. But for the most part, most of your training and response is going toward EMS.
Okay. I know there was some discussion about the hazardous materials team. What are the hazardous materials with which you would work? I mean, are they only certain things like, oh, it's just only petroleum, or it's only, some oil substance? I mean, or is it more broadly defined?
Joel, that's a very wide area to concentrate on. The most frequent things that we deal with as a hazardous materials team is diesel spills, involved with transportation. An 18-wheeler gets involved in a wreck and it splits its saddle tank, and all of a sudden you have 100 gallons of diesel fuel running down the side of the interstate. That's a very common call for us. Some of the things that are more infrequent and are calls that involve small amounts of radioactive material. Not many people think about it, but there's a lot of radioactive material around in the doctor's offices and in some research labs, and all that's going across the roadways every day. There's usually nothing to it. We very rarely get involved in radioactive calls. We had one a couple weeks ago, but it's something we have to train for. If you were to pull up a list of chemicals on the internet, I'm not so sure how many pages it would take. It'd probably take, you just scroll and scroll and scroll. We can't possibly learn about every single chemical out there. What we try to do is learn about the basics of large groups of chemicals, so that when we do encounter a call, we know the basics of how to handle it, and then we start doing a lot of research. One of the basic differences in response from fire to hazmat is when there's a fire call, we typically go running in when everybody's running out. In a hazardous materials call, we usually take the time to figure out what we're dealing with before we go running in. Because if we go running into an environment that we're not familiar with and not properly protected from, we make the problem worse and endanger the crews that we have. So it's a lot of research based. It's a lot of training on general scenarios, and it keeps us busy.
Well, so what if happens if you have a scenario where there's a spill and the person who's transporting it doesn't even know exactly what they were transporting? I mean, they're not entirely clear. You might say, hey, well, what is this? What compounds are in this? And they're like, I don't know, I have no idea. So how do you address that? I mean, as a responding group, I mean, because it might be something you don't know. I mean,
Right.
you've not dealt before.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. By law, the DOT regulations, the transporters, the folks driving the vehicles are supposed to either know what they have. They're supposed to have documentation in the vehicle somewhere as to what their load is. Now, of course, we all know that not everybody follows the law. So, if the driver of the vehicle is no longer there for whatever reason, then we start to go into our kind of Sherlock Holmes and try to figure things out. Look at what type of container it is. What are the characteristics of the material itself? And as you look at all these things, you can start to narrow down pretty rapidly as to what may be in the containers. Most hazardous materials are supposed to be pretty well labeled, if not by name, definitely by some coding that we're very familiar with. And so we can reference a lot of the coding, and we can look at the names of the materials, and the name may have 20 letters in the alphabet in it, but we can do a little bit of research on the computers we have on scene and figure out the hazards of those materials pretty rapidly, and pretty sure we'd have the materials to handle most instances, including any types of terrorist events, whether it's some sort of weapon of mass destruction, some biological material, chemical weapons, things like that. We're also handled to we're capable of handling, or at least recognizing, those type of situations.
Well, in a case like where you have a diesel spill, like you mentioned, let's say heaven forbid, it's like I-75 north at 5 o'clock. Perfect timing for this to happen. So now you're shutting down all the lanes of interstate. How do you handle that? Because I'm sure you're very mindful of the pressure to get the roads back open for people to go through, because now the traffic that was backed up to 285 is now backed up to Midtown, is now backed up to Grady's, backed up to the airport, and it's all because of 75 and this big spill. So how do you work out those dynamics as an entity?
We've got several different tools in our toolbox to handle items like that. The biggest one is a program that started across Metro Atlanta over the last 2 to 3 years. It's called the TRIP program. And what that is the Georgia Department of Transportation has gotten with a lot of the major towing operations throughout Metro Atlanta and identified who is most readily available to get out there to the scene and clear any type of wreckage, and including some of the diesel spills. And so those folks, once the situation is identified, they're able to dispatch the wrecker services out there, and they're put on a clock where if they get the wreck off the interstate and get the travel lanes open back up within 90 minutes, there's a financial incentive that comes along with doing that. And so the TRIP program has proved to be very effective, where in the past it might have taken 4 to 6 hours to clear a given scene. There's now the financial incentive with the wrecker agencies, and some of the wrecker agencies work together to try to meet that time frame and get that incentive pay for reaching the 90-minute clearance mark. So if you think back, we really haven't had too many of those major instances that have closed the interstate for 6, 8, 10 hours. It just doesn't happen anymore. We had them in the past, but we've made a lot of strides forward as a state, really, to minimize those type of situations, because we do recognize the hazards of and the inconvenience of having the interstate closed for 8 hours or 10 hours.
Okay. I know that one of you mentioned that there's an airport fire station. What are the specific challenges associated with it that you might not see in a typical fire station that you might have that's in any other part of the county?
The airport fire station right now is in the design phase. McCollum Airport, it was generally a small general aviation field, single engine prop aircraft coming and going. Anybody who lives up in the Kennesaw area knows that the airport has grown dramatically. The runway right now is about 6,300 feet. With that, they're able to take larger and larger aircraft landing and taking off out of there. There's one aircraft base there that's 120 feet long and is originally designed to carry about 70 passengers. So from a response perspective, that brings us a lot more challenges. We're used to dealing with car fires and house fires and things of that nature. An aircraft fire with that many people in a very confined space is a very unique challenge. And so what we're doing as a department to further that is we are training our folks into the hazards specifically for aircraft fire rescue. We've purchased a vehicle that's specific to airport firefighting. It's a vehicle that carries a lot more water and a lot more foam than a typical fire engine, and very little hose because the truck approaches the aircraft and shoots all their agent through the turrets on the truck, and that can be done by one person within the cab. So those are very specialized vehicles, and Cobb County's made the investment to purchase one of those. And so in about a year and a half or 2 years, hopefully we're going to have the fire station on the airport opened up, and we will have dedicated fire service 24/7 for the airport and those that need it.
Okay. Also, I know there was a discussion about the I guess you call it the technical rescue team. I think you mentioned some incidents that might involve it, like advanced rescue vehicle extrication and trench rescue and structural collapse. Can you talk a little bit more about those types of events and scenarios that would be covered by that department?
Yeah, most of our responses are typically probably to vehicle extrications, and believe it or not, swiftwater rescues on the Chattahoochee River. It's a very popular location in the summertime, and if you've ever been down there on the weekends, the crowd is build and build and build, and there's a need for us to be down there quite often in the summertime. Typically, our folks go anywhere from 40 to 80 hours of training per discipline to learn the skills to deal with these type of incidents. But I would say that most of these are low frequency, high risk events. Very, very dangerous to our folks, so it requires some special skills, special equipment, special training.
Okay. What are some specific challenges for safety that you as a department know about now that we're in April, about to roll into May, that people should be on alert for and make sure they're more careful so that they don't end up having to make that fateful 911 call?
From my perspective, I think water safety would be an important area to pay attention to. Just where your PFDs, be aware of your surroundings, and if you're on the river, just be aware of the water levels and the rise and fall of those levels.
Okay. All right. Some additional hazards people should be on alert for?
Well, now as we're getting into warmer weather too, people are out doing yard work, doing outside work, need to make sure that you hydrate properly. Come in when you're tired or when you're too hot. Sometimes people want to stay out there to get as much done as they can before the day's over. You don't want to get dehydrated or get heat exhaustion or heat stroke. So just pay attention about keeping yourself hydrated when you're working outside.
Okay. Any other additional hazards we might run into this time of year that you want the public to be on alert for?
Well, also, if you're allergic to bee stings, bees are starting to become active again now that it's getting warmer, and you'll start seeing more and more. We'll start running more and more calls with allergic reactions involving insects.
Okay. What about people grilling out? I mean, do you see a lot of people who cook too close to the house and catch the house on fire? Is that a very frequent thing, or they maybe put a little too much lighter fluid?
It does happen occasionally. Our recommendation from the fire marshal's office would always be to place your grill on a non-combustible surface. Sometimes people heed that, sometimes they don't. But obviously that is a danger. Be sure the grill is turned off when you're done, and make sure it's out before you move it to somewhere. Some people store their grills indoors, and if they use charcoal, they don't put the fire out completely before they move the grill indoors. Also, proper disposal of ashes. Put it in a metal container, sit it on a non-combustible surface, and let it sit for at least 24 hours, if not longer, so that all the embers can cool off and be completely out before you put it in a garbage can. We've, over the years, I think all of us have responded to calls where people put ashes either from a fireplace or a grill or something else in a combustible container, a cardboard box, a plastic container, then they put it in a big garbage can, and before we know it, and it's up against the house, before we know it, we've got a fully involved structure fire. So proper disposal of ashes is always something important.
All right. One thing I'd like to do is get each one of you to just sort of talk about what is some information that you would like the public to know about the fire department and its work in Cobb that they don't know about, that they may be surprised to hear about. And also, if that includes a safety tip as well, that'd be great as well. Because again, we want to educate our audience that's watching this, whether it's on TV or online. And I guess I'll start with you, Chief.
I guess one of the things that a lot of folks that wouldn't know in Cobb County, and really some folks in our fire department don't know, is hazardous materials. The folks, it's like Wayman suggested earlier for technical rescue. It's a low frequency, high risk type of call. And one of the great things that we have in our county is we have a great relationship with a civil support team at Dobbins. Basically, the Army's 4th Civil Support Team is the Army's version of a hazmat team. That's all they do, all day long, is they worry about hazmats. They worry about who's going to potentially attack high-risk targets. Our hazmat team works hand in hand with that group, and so we have an unbelievable resource in our county at our disposal should something of a significant nature happen. And so, for me, the big thing is that we have a lot of resources we can bring to bear for larger types of events, whether it's hazardous materials, whether it's technical rescue, active shooter, any of those types of events. We can usually call on a large mutual aid response support from our outside agencies, and we would provide the same in return if they had such events. And so I think that's one thing that people should be aware of, that we do have the ability to handle some very significant events locally.
All right, great, thank you.
Well, I think from a trained perspective, we would like the community to know that we believe in diversity in our department. And from a recruitment standpoint of view, we try to recruit people of all backgrounds. We understand that traditional 6 foot, 200-pound firefighter really doesn't exist. We need people, various skill sets that goes along with age, people who are bilingual. I know a lot of females look at this as primarily a male-dominated job. However, we're open to recruiting female firefighters into our department. So from a training perspective, we would like the community to know that we are trying to have a diverse fire department and a fire department that kind of reflects our community.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Excuse me, Chief Miller.
Just a couple of things. As far as advice about EMS, the big thing I'd like to tell everybody is that we have a lot of people that come out that say they feel like they're bothering us by calling 911. And sometimes they'll ignore medical symptoms that they're having, and we'll get there and we'll say, well, how long have you been having chest pains? And they might say 4 hours. And you say, well, how come you didn't call us earlier? Well, I didn't want to bother y'all. That's what we're here for. And if you feel it's an emergency, call us, and we'll be happy to come out. I did point out earlier that we, as the fire department, we don't transport you to the hospital. We have a private service that does that, and I think a lot of people don't know that. But sometimes the firefighters may ride in to assist. If it's especially like if it's a cardiac arrest, they'll assist with CPR on the way to the hospital. But transporting is something that we don't do. And I wanted to point out one more thing before we leave. We talked about us being a Class 1 department. We are also an accredited fire department. And we get our accreditation by being evaluated on a rating scale also. We're rated on how long it takes us to get to the scene and how long our different programs work. And then they send out an evaluation team that's made up of people from other departments. And only 10% of the U.S. population is covered by an accredited department. It's very hard to get it. It usually takes 3 to 5 years to get it. And there's only 9 fire departments in the state of Georgia that are accredited, and we're one of them.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Sergeant Westbrook?
I don't know about unknown stuff that we do that nobody knows. However, usually when we hire a new inspector, and if they come from inside our department and they come to into the fire marshal's office, usually after about 6 months, their head's spinning and they say, "We can't believe you do all this. All the inspections that we do, all the different places we go, how we're involved in new buildings from zoning all the way through to certificate of occupancy." So that's a few of the things, but probably if I had to give one piece of advice that would help us out the most is with outdoor burning. We get a lot of calls from outdoor burning. You've mentioned it. We've talked about it earlier today, but if people would follow the ordinance when they burn outside, it would help us so much. And the key part of that is if you burn outdoors, when you're finished burning, make sure your fire is completely out, completely. And that would help us a lot. And then I'm going to add a bit of trivia. From our website, we get regular statistics from our website. So we've got a lot of information on our website, not just the fire marshal portion, but the fire department website, web pages as a whole. But very consistently, the top 3 pages that are hit on our website are outdoor burning, employment, people wanting jobs for fire department, and station tours. That's our top 3 pages. So if you didn't know, now you know.
Well, that's an interesting bit of trivia. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. Chief Jordan.
Yes, sir. Just make the public aware. A lot of times when folks call 911 for a medical reason, they think they're getting an ambulance. They're also getting a fire truck. That's part of the system. There's a rare occasion where an ambulance is sent without a fire truck, but it's not very often. So a lot of them are surprised when we show up in a big red fire truck and want to know why we're there. We call for an ambulance. That's why.
Okay.
We're all medically trained as well.
All right, wonderful. Well, I hate to bring our evening to a close, but I think that we're all out of time here on our broadcast. But I do want to thank EMS Division Chief Spencer Miller, District Chief Wayman Jordan, District Chief Scott White, Fire Marshal Jay Westbrook, and Training Officer Will Collier. Tonight, you're all wonderful public service. We really appreciate your taking time out of your personal lives to be with us and educate our public, because you obviously perform great service every day, and there's some wonderful wisdom you've acquired in that process that we've been able to share tonight with our audience. And so we're very thankful to each one of you for all the work you do each and every day, and we really do appreciate that very much being with us tonight. And I think without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Carol, and she'll close us out this evening's program.
Okay, well, thank you, Joel. We want to thank our panelists again for providing us information on what you do and for the services that you provide. And we want to thank the Cobb County Commissioners for allowing us to offer this program to citizens. We thank our viewers for their participation, and I invite you to join us next month when we talk about mental health awareness. Thank you and good night.